Notifies via email. Okay, here we can see the configuration window to notify via email. So the first thing we do is we select the function, as in all the different system tasks that we're going to see. And here we can select two different options. How do we want to send this? Unique or by batches? Basically, unique has all the features we need in order to send emails. By batches, it has additional features that are going to allow us to send massive amount of emails. Okay, let's say I want to send 100, 200 emails at once, and this is probably going to give us certain problems. It's going to saturate the servers. So what we want to do is create smaller batches and do this automatically so that these batches are delivered, uh, let's say in different time periods. Okay, I'll give you more details in a moment. Now, we have the first option here. It's called email server. And here we're going to either select general, and this is going to allow us to reuse a general configuration that we have set up in structure. Okay, so if we go to structure email, we're going to see the general configuration for our email server. And this configuration, it's what's going to allow Autoportal to deliver these emails automatically. But if we want, we can select the option customized. We can see it here. What happens if we select the option customized? We're going to be able to set up a different email server for each one of our specific system tasks. Usually, we're not going to want to use this because basically we just want to use one email server and reuse it all the time for all of our different system tasks. But in other scenarios, we want to customize this. For example, here in our company, we have an email server where most of the emails are delivered um, through a corporate email address, and whoever receives it can see who's sending them this email. They see it's a corporate email address from Autoportal. But here in the training department, we might want to customize it because in the training department, we also send a lot of automatic emails. So we can customize it and we can change the details. So this is something that's controlled by our department. Then we have another option. Well, when we open this feature here, general or customized, it's going to open a window like this where we can add the SMTP server. If it requires a secure connection, it's going to ask us for a user and password and maybe a domain. Okay, so here we've got different settings that we have to field in depending on the type of email server that we're using. An interesting feature I want to highlight here is that we could actually indicate that we want to manually input the information of the sender when this email is delivered, or we want to select panel, and we could do this dynamically. If I select panel, I could map two panel fields here, and I could actually select dynamically during the process who's going to be the sender of this email. And over here where it says reply to, it's going to allow us to indicate when someone clicks on the reply button on their email, who do we want this email to automatically be replied to? Okay, because we might want it to be someone different than the sender. Okay, this isn't very common, but in some scenarios, let's say here we have a corporate information of our company, but then when someone clicks on reply, we want it to go to a specific person or specific department. So here we could change the reply to, uh, let's say to ensure that someone else is going to receive this reply. And here when it comes to addressees, it's going to be a little bit different as we saw in the previous option when we wanted to notify employees, because here the addressee is basically it's a text field or several text fields that I want to use in order to deliver this email. And obviously this text field has to contain an email. So when we click here on add addressee, it's going to give us several options. As we can see here, it says we can select general terms, suffixes, groups of field columns. Okay, so there's lots of different options. Basically, if let's imagine I select a one-line text field, then it's very important that in that one-line text field there is an email address. If I select a suffix, let's say for example, I want to notify an employee via email. So I might use the suffix that contains his email. If the suffix is empty, he's not going to receive the email. Okay, so it's very important that we take this into account. When we configure our processes, we have to ensure that these fields that we've added as addresses here have information so that they can actually receive the email. There's another option here that allows us to separate the amount of people we're sending notifications to by a comma or a semicolon. This means that each one of them is going to receive the notification. Besides, we could copy or blind copy more people in our notifications via email. The next option we're going to see here, number 7, is called subject. Okay, so here we're going to indicate the subject of our email. And it says it could be a panel field or a fixed value. So if we select a panel field, it's going to be dynamic. If we mark manual, we can just indicate some text manually. For example, uh, your your request has been approved, for example, and then in every single process, the subject of that email would always be exactly the same. So that's the difference between selecting panel or manual. Okay, and over here, there's several options. So I'm going to start with number 8. Number 8 is called content objects, and here we can select a multiple selection field. This one is used for notifying someone based on a certain condition. Okay, so we can have a multiple selection field. Let's say it's called I'm interested in. That's the name of the field. And it's got several options. I'm interested in sports. I'm interested in video games. I'm interested in music. I'm interested in arts or whatever. Okay, so someone could actually select one or more options. And then here in the system task, when we want to notify people, we can select this multiple selection field here, the same one, okay, that we have in the record of these people. And once we've done this, down here in number 9, where it says match, we could say any or all. What does this mean? This means that in order for this email to be delivered, we have to meet at least one of those options that someone has marked in their record. If we mark the option all, it means unless they have marked the exact same options, okay, maybe let's say there's 10 different options and they've marked 3, they've marked number 1, number 5, and number 10. Well, that means if I mark all here, we have to match the exact same ones here in the process, okay? So it's going to compare the options that were marked here in the process, and it's only going to notify those people who have those options marked in their record. Okay, this is useful when we're trying to launch marketing campaigns. Let's say we're trying to launch marketing campaigns to our customers and we want to send a notification. So in the process we say, okay, this notification has to be sent to anyone who's interested in arts, in I don't know, in movies and in music. So then maybe someone in their record, they have marked they're interested in sports and they're interested in video games. Well, they're not going to receive this notification. If, let's say they said they were interested in sports, video games, and music, and here we've marked the option any, well, then in that case, they would receive the notification because there's at least one option that matches in their record that matches the option that was selected here in the process. And then down here, there's an option that says send without restrictions or subject to restrictions. Now, what does subject to restrictions mean? In the in the record of a contact, or in the record, yes, in the record of a contact, it's not for employees. In the record of the contact, there's an option. It's a system field that's called send email, and it's a yes no field. So this is created by default in the contact record. And basically, whatever someone inputs in this field is going to be read or is going to be taken into account by this system task in order to decide whether it sends the email to that person or not. Let's say I'm sending a massive delivery of emails to 100 contacts. but some of them have told me that they're not interested in receiving notifications. Okay, the typical email deliveries where we might be informing people of our products or our services, but certain people just say they don't want to be informed. So if they don't want to be informed and we want to respect that, here we're going to say, yes, it is subject to restrictions. So if they haven't marked yes in their record, they do want to receive notifications, then I'm not going to send them this email. Okay. And then down here, we have the content option where we can add whatever content we want to our email. We can add plain text. We can add panel fields, so we can maybe combine text and panel fields in order to build the content of my email notification. Basically, this is what's going to appear in the body of the email. And down here, I'm going to indicate if I want this information to be sent as plain text with no format or as rich text. That's going to allow me formatted text. It's going to allow images, hyperlinks, and kinds of other details. Now here we're going to see some options that do not apply to the unique delivery of emails. It only applies when we've selected in the configuration of our system task, we've selected the option by batches. So then all of these features are going to be displayed. And this is going to allow us to create batches. For example, which is the batch volume. Here we have all the settings, all the options that we can select. They can be mapped with panel fields. And here we have all the automatic, or let's say the static settings, where if there is no panel field, it's just going to apply whatever settings we indicated here. Okay, so let's just talk about the second column, but we already know in this first column of information, we could map fields of the panel and we can make this dynamic. But let's say here, we're going to create batches of 20 emails and we're going to deliver them every 5 minutes. Why is this important? Because we don't want to saturate the servers. Besides, uh, lots of email systems, what they're going to do is they're going to mark everything as spam, or they're going to start blocking them if we send hundreds of emails in a matter of seconds. So this is very important to create smaller batches and then indicate during how much time do we want the system to pause between one batch and another one. And then here we've got some other values. I'm not going to explain this really in much detail because just by reading it, anyone who's used to sending large amounts of emails is going to understand how this works. Down here we have an option that allows us to save the result in the panel. So let's say we've delivered 100, 200 emails, but maybe not all the emails were actually delivered. Let's say I wanted to notify via email all of my customers, all of my contacts. But maybe some of my contacts didn't have an email address in their record. So obviously they're not going to receive the information. And maybe there could be other scenarios where they don't receive the email. Okay, so this is going to allow me to store in different panel fields the results of my emails. The most important one is the return code down here. This is probably the one that we're going to use in most common scenarios. But in these scenarios where we want to send large amounts of emails, then we're also going to want to know how many emails were targeted, how many emails were actually sent. So maybe I sent 100 emails, but only 50 were targeted. How many were not sent? Obviously, in this case, it would be 52. And here the return code is going to tell me if they were all sent, if some failed, or if all of them failed. But this is more like general information, and this is a bit more specific because it gives me the exact numbers. And then over here where it says compliments, it's going to allow us to attach documents to the email. So basically, if I say panel, I'm going to be able to select the library, and whatever documents were dropped into this library, they're going to be attached to the email. We can also design a reply form. This is quite interesting because it's going to allow us to send an email with a link to a reply form. If we do so, whoever is receiving this email can click on the link, a form is going to pop up and they can input information. And besides, whatever they input inside of this form, we actually can store that information in their record. This is something I'll mention in a bit more detail later. And then finally, we have the option form expiration. It's going to allow us to make this form disactivate after a certain amount of time. Okay, so if we select panel field, it's going to ask us for a date. But if we indicate here minutes, well, maybe we want to put, I don't know how many minutes, but we can put as much amount of time as we want this form to be available. Let's say we're making a survey and it's a massive survey where we're asking all of our customers if they're interested in a certain product or an update or whatever. Now we want this survey to be available during the next week or the next 24 hours. After that amount of time, if someone tries to answer the survey, the system is going to tell them, look, this survey has expired. It's not available anymore. Okay, so that would be this option down here. Now here we have an example of how to use the reply form. Let's say the flow goes into the system task and it triggers, I don't know, 100 emails. And obviously the addressees receive the email in their inbox. And obviously the process flow does not stop when it comes to this system task. But we're saying the email has a link, and this link is going to allow them to open a form. Okay, they're going to be able to open a form, but this has nothing to do with the flow of the process. Okay, so when they click on this link, the form is going to open, and they're going to be able to fill in information. Okay, but whatever information they can fill in here, it's going to be information of their record. So let's say I have in my contact record, I have a field that's called interested in. And here I have cinema releases, cinema awards, fashion, and all kinds of other options. When they mark these options and they finish, what's going to happen with this information is going to be stored in their record, not in the panel of the process, because obviously these might be it might be one person or it might be 100 different people who are receiving these emails. Now, where is this information going to be stored? In their record. Okay, so this is very interesting for survey, for example, where we want to pick up information of all of our customers. So maybe they click on the link, they answer the survey. Once they're finished, this information is stored in their record, not in the panel of the process. And besides, the flow is not going to stop here. So it says here, as suffixes, the selected values for the showed field would be stored in the addressee's contract record, not in the panel of the process. Okay, so I'm going to configure the system task to send emails via email. So again, I'm going to select the type, notifier, function. This time I'm going to select notify via email, and I'm going to select unique. I'll continue, and email server, I'm just going to leave it as it is. This option could be configured, so I could click here. This is the configuration that has been set up in structure. Okay, so I can see it from here, and I can even modify it. Let's go to structure, that way we can see it. If I go to structure and I go to mail, here I can see the information. So we can use this information, or let's say we can use the shared information for all of our processes, for all of our different system tasks. But if we want, we could also customize this. Okay, now we could indicate whatever settings we want for this unique, for this specific email delivery. But I'm just going to mark general. And here I'm going to indicate who's going to be the addressee. I'm going to go for uh, this one here. For example, we've got an email. It's a suffix of an account. Or I've also got an employee email. I could even select both. Okay, so whatever text is in here, if it's an email address, it's going to receive an email. And the same thing happens here. Okay, so we've got our addressees. Here we can say we want to send without restriction. We don't want to blind copy anyone. What we do want, for example, is a subject. So here, let me see. I'm going to put this is a test. I'm also going to attach some documents. So I'm going to click here on where's the documents panel, and I'm going to select the library field. There we go. So now I can attach documents to my notification. I want rich text. I'm going to save. Oh, I forgot to add the content here. So, okay. If I want to format this text, I can do that. Okay, that's enough. The last thing I want to do is add a return code here. I'll select this field here. I'm ready to go. I'm going to save and exit. So if everything goes okay, if my email server is set up correctly, I should be receiving this notification to my email inbox. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do now is test this process. We already know I could go to my tasks and test it from here, or I could actually copy the link of the start message event, paste it here on a new tab, and trigger the process. For me here, it's very important to have an email address. Okay, so I'm going to select an employee here. And here I have an email address, for example, autoportal.demo@gmail.com. This is one of the fields I'm using in order to deliver the email. Okay, remember I've indicated two different addresses. Well, let's say here I have one, and here I want to attach a document because I want an attachment to be displayed in my notification. I'll select I don't know, some file. Let me see. Let's say I want a text document. Okay, so I'm going to attach this to the email. All right, I don't need it to add any other information. This is enough for the test. I'm going to start the process. And I'm going to go to this email inbox. We can see it here. It's the same one we're using here. Okay, so we should receive the email. Here we can see we've received the email. When I enter, I can see the text that I've added to the email body. I can also see there's an attachment. I'm going to modify this real quickly. So I'm going back to the configuration and I'm going to change this a little bit so that it contains some dynamic data. For example, this is a test regarding, and I'll add some panel data like the reference, process. Okay. I'll add a date field here. Okay, I'm going to change the format a little bit. And we're good to go. Okay. I'm going to save and exit. I'm going to launch another process. And now I'm going to open my email inbox to see the email I just received. Okay, here we are. So we can see it's got this fixed text that I entered initially, but then it's also got these dynamic values that are retrieved from the panel process data. Okay, so each instance could have a totally different email.